James catches, puts up a three. Won't go. Rebound Bosch. Back out to Allen. His three-pointer. Bang! Tie game with 5 seconds remaining.
All right, the away team is back. A very stunned away team.
Yep.
Having just witnessed the end of the Nuggets-Clippers series.
The end of the Clippers season. And I don't know what else it's going to mean. Might be the end of Doc Rivers' career in LA. There's so much fallout that's going to come from this. You know, people were talking about all the fallout from the Houston Lakers series, but this is just crazy.
It's so nuts that the first game of the night ended with this amazing Bam Adebayo block, which we'll certainly talk about later. But somehow this night will be remembered not for that block, but for just the epically terrible ending to this game.
It was something else. I mean, you know, it's one thing to lose in the last quarter, the last possessions. It's another thing to just totally fold, like we saw the Clippers doing from basically the third quarter on.
Yeah, I mean, the final tally for the fourth quarter was 22 points for Denver, 15 points for LA. But that doesn't do justice the fact that LA just could not buy a basket.
I'm surprised it was 15 because it took them 7 minutes to score a field goal.
Yeah. The issues that the offense was having in the fourth quarter. I mean, it was just unbelievable. They started, 0 for 9? And Denver wasn't great in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, they were lucky that Denver wasn't making their shots because it was just... I don't even think it was because the Clippers were playing particularly tight defense or anything like that. I think it was Game 7. You know, Game 7 stuff that happens. Nerves get to the guys and shots start bricking. But if you're up by 16 and you're bricking shots, that's a lot different than down by 16 in the fourth quarter with all those expectations that are set on you.
Yeah, and look, that's what Kawhi Leonard's MO is that he's the guy who's going to get you out of those slumps. He's the guy that's going to come in during clutch situations and score you buckets, right? And Kawhi Leonard was a team-leading minus 21. And 6 for 22 from the field. Paul George wasn't much better. 4 for 16, minus 20. Together, 10 for 38.
Yeah, that's not going to cut it. And this is actually something that I noticed when I was watching games 5 and 6. The Clippers bench was getting just systematically exploited and outclassed at every turn, while Paul George and Kawhi were playing pretty good. So it's like, what happens when even they play badly? Which is what happened this game. Well, it turns into a 15-point loss.
Yeah, and, you know, it's interesting because at the beginning of the game, at the end of the first quarter and beginning of the second quarter, it was the Denver bench that was getting destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
It looked like Lou Williams had finally figured out his game. He's been one of the most peculiar players to evaluate for the series. Going into the game, he was plus 45 for the series, but shooting 35% from the field and 9.5% from three. Sorry, that's in games 1 through 5. He finally hit a few in game 6, but yeah, it's just very bizarre because he is a really good player.
Funny enough, he was a plus tonight, but you wouldn't know that by watching the game, considering just how badly, I mean, he missed it must have been 4 point-blank layups that were pretty much wide open. Just like the ball spinning out. Just crazy things were happening. I mean, the Clippers curse may be real.
Yeah, well, there was that particular layup in the third quarter that you noted. That was, it was so wide open and so close to falling. It looked like the whole team was unnerved.
I mean, this might spell the end for Doc because this has happened to him multiple times in his career. He's the only coach who's ever had multiple 3-1 comeback losses, and this is his third one. He was the only one who had 2, and now it's a third one. There's an issue there, and I think that there's kind of an inability to make adjustments that I noticed. The Jokic defensive assignments, they actually did a lot better on him this game. They slowed him down quite a bit, and their timing on putting defensive pressure on him and throwing off his vision was a lot better in the last few games. They were letting him have whatever pass he wanted. Zubac was doing okay. Montrez was just getting absolutely eaten alive out there. The problem was it didn't matter.
I think it's interesting that Zubac only played 14 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
The minutes with Montrezl Harrell have looked horrible all series. He's just not big enough to guard a guy like Nikola Jokic. He was -8 tonight, and he's minus a bajillion for the series.
Yeah.
And there were other games in the series that Zubac played extended minutes, and he looked like he was making Nikola Jokic uncomfortable when he shot, right? You're never going to guard Jokic fully, right? Because he's so good at taking unorthodox, off-balance shots. But if you can at least put a man that's big enough not to get backed down on a post-up, and also large enough to contest shots, I think that's more effective than what the Clippers did tonight, which seemed to be, okay, we are going to put our best perimeter defenders on him. I saw a lot of Paul George on Nikola Jokic tonight, and Paul George just didn't seem like he was strong enough to take a Nikola Jokic back down.
Yeah. I'm surprised there wasn't a little bit more Kawhi on Jokic, although, and that's what I was thinking going into this game was, okay, Zubac, you can only play him for so long on Jokic before he fouls out or something like that, or is unplayable. But Kawhi, he's big. He can take the post hits. You know, he's got a lot of strength and length. And I thought that he could give Jokic quite a bit of an issue. And I thought what was also interesting, just going back to talking about Doc Rivers' adjustments, what he was doing throughout the series was playing really aggressively on Murray. The defensive assignment on Murray was super fluid. I would see different guys switching on to him, keep it unexpected for him, double him really readily. And it seems in tonight's game, they kind of gave Murray a little bit more space to operate and gave Jokic a lot less. And I thought that would actually help a little bit, but Murray just went off. And I mean, it might have been an issue with adjusting to the new defensive scheme that they just weren't ready for, because the Clippers defense just looked completely disjointed. Guys did not know who they needed to cover. Doc Rivers clearly didn't make the rules of the scheme apparent enough to his players for them to be able to buy into it in a meaningful way. And I mean, it cost them the series because the Nuggets were getting really wide open shots throughout the game.
What's interesting about that point is more Paul George on Nikola Jokic means less Paul George on Jamal Murray, right? And Jamal Murray was absolutely spectacular tonight. 15 for 26 from the field, 6 for 13 from 3. Many of those, as we saw, were insane shots.
Yeah.
Especially that fourth quarter fading out of bounds 3-point shot. Unbelievable. Ended up with 40 points. There was a lot of Kawhi on him. A lot of doubling him, especially later in the shot clock. I noticed they were sending a defender his way to push the ball out of his hands. And then it got to Jokic, and Jokic didn't have a particularly efficient game. 5 for 13 from the field, but I think with a smaller defender on him for the entire game, he was just able to affect the game in so many different ways, right? You can look over your man and see cutters more easily, right? 13 assists for the game. You're going to be able to out-rebound people, 22 boards. Played 40 minutes, which for a man of his stature is a lot of minutes, you know? And was plus 22. I mean, what a game.
Yeah, what a game. I mean, to be fair, the Clippers caused Denver to have 20 turnovers throughout the game. And 10 of those are just Jokic and Murray.
Yeah.
So I will say that they were quite effective at that. And it was it looked really bad for Denver in the first half. They just kept turning over the ball. They were having good possessions when they weren't running into trouble with the Clippers defense, but the turnovers were really outweighing any kind of benefit that they got. The problem was plays where the Clippers tried to go really aggressively for a turnover and didn't succeed. They led to open shots.
And you saw a lot of that from the role players, right? Jeremy Grant had a really good game. So did Paul Millsap, Gary Harris. I think one of the big difference makers in this game was the fact that those guys all hit a couple 3-pointers.
Yeah.
That just opens everything up for Jokic and Murray. And then on the other side of the ball, I think we should tout Denver's defense.
Yeah.
They played really tight defense clogging the paint without fouling, especially in the fourth quarter. It got a little dicey in the second quarter, but they really keyed in the fourth quarter. And I think it should also be noted that Porter Jr. only played 15 minutes in this game. I mean, he wasn't having a great offensive game, just shot 2 shots and missed both of them. But you can tell that the defense with him was worrisome for Mike Malone. And I think that worry was warranted, and it was a very smart decision not to play him a lot this game.
Yeah, definitely. Although he did get like 7 rebounds, and that's another part of the story is that Denver out-rebounded the Clippers by 17 boards. Whew. And that's crazy. I mean, it's just spectacular. The Clippers only had 25 defensive rebounds the entire game.
That's insane.
Is crazy. And Jokic getting 19 defensive rebounds pretty much makes up the difference between the two teams. I think it was 18 actually. So out-rebounded by 18, and you're not going to get enough possessions to make a difference there.
Well, here's an interesting thought. I wonder how much of this series is going to be a referendum on small ball. Because we've really seen that in both of the LA series from the second round. These teams that have these very well-curated small ball rosters, perhaps some would say the best curated small ball rosters ever created, and yet when they went up against a team with a dominant big man, they get destroyed.
Yeah, I'm just shocked. I just can't believe it. Jokic looks incredible. Looks like the second coming of Dirk Nowitzki, except somehow he takes his shots even more off balance and is like a way better passer.
Yeah, I thought that Jeff Van Gundy comment about the fact that he actually pushes off of his right leg instead of Dirk pushing off of his left leg. I thought that was very interesting from the perspective of a basketball player, because if you're used to somebody mimicking a move the same way and everyone else in the league mimicking that move the same way, it can be very disorienting when somebody changes it in a subtle way like that.
Yeah. I mean, and I also just want to give credit to Jamal Murray's off-ball game in this series, just the screens. We have posted a video on Twitter, but the screens that he's been setting to get his teammates easier buckets have been great. I know they opened up a lot of shots for not only role players, but also Jokic. Him and Jokic, just their two-man game has been like a ballet. I might have stolen that from a commentator, but it has been amazing to watch. It's really been like a work of art. And yeah, I'm just glad that the team that was playing the better fundamentally team-based basketball won, because the Clippers really were resting on the talent of their main 2 stars, and once variance went at that, they didn't have anything to go back on. And it's weird. It's not like they have a bad roster. It's just, I guess, just surprisingly offensively thin after the first 2 guys.
There's so much going through my head right now about this game. What will happen to the Clippers next year? I think realistically, they're just going to bring it back. Hope that this loss lights a fire under Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, and that they can come together and use it as motivation next year. What I think's more interesting is, what does this win mean for Denver?
Yeah.
Because they're such a young team, and this is the sort of win that I think could catapult Denver to the next level.
Yeah. I mean, who expected Jamal Murray to make such a leap after coming back from quarantine?
Just nuts.
Yeah. It's 2 different players out there.
Yeah.
Like, you look at his performance earlier in the season and just, you know, a lot of the bad habits might still be there a little bit. He's definitely not the most amazing passer or anything, but his shot creation ability has just skyrocketed. And his just sense for when to move off ball, how to move off ball, how to get himself open looks, not just his teammates, has just reached a level that didn't seem possible at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, he's been really opening up the court for other players. We always knew that he was good as a cutter, right? Because he's been doing that around Nikola Jokic for years now. Yeah, it's funny. We were talking during the broadcast about his contract, because I remember when it was signed, I was saying that he hadn't done anything to deserve a $40 million contract in 2024, 2025. But now, after this playoffs, you know, maybe he waited an extra year to
Mhm.
prove to us that he deserved this, because
Yeah.
I would max the hell out of this guy right now, you know? He's still only 22 years old, man.
Yeah, bright future for the Denver team. Yeah, shocking to come back from 2-3-1 deficits in the same postseason.
It's absolutely nuts. Absolutely nuts.
Yeah, credit to Mike Malone for making the right adjustments too. I mean, he really poked at the weaknesses of these teams and was able to cause both the Jazz and the Clippers to break. It's amazing that the Jazz gave them so much more of a fight at the end of it.
Yeah, I mean, if you didn't know who the two men on the sidelines were tonight, you would assume that Mike Malone was the veteran who had been coaching in the NBA for almost 30 years, and that Doc Rivers was the new coach,
Yeah.
right? Doc Rivers looked very frazzled the
Mhm.
whole game, and Mike Malone exuded a confidence that I think shocked even me.
Yeah. Well, I would say to Doc Rivers, in the immortal words of Donald Trump in one of those debates with Hillary Clinton, you've got experience, but it's bad experience. It's bad experience.
Yeah, the '08 Celtics championship, bad experience.
Well, 3-3-1 losses in series is pretty brutal, man. Anyways, let's not dwell on it too much. Yeah, RIP Clippers. Better luck next year. Glad that Kawhi didn't get his championship this year. Maybe he should have thought twice about leaving the Raptors. Anyways, let's talk about the other game tonight. The Heat versus the Celtics. Very fun game to watch. Very close. Went to overtime. And the Heat pulled it off.
Yeah.
How about that Adebayo block? Am I right?
Yeah, let's start there. So you had the Adebayo block. You had the Butler three-pointer at the end of regulation, immediately preceded by an underrated Tyler Herro three-pointer that was insanely contested.
Yeah, just super quick release under like heavy defensive pressure, and it just swished.
Amazing arc, too.
Yeah.
Like, it looked like a classic Steve Nash shot, you know?
Yeah, it's a good thing that he showed up because Duncan Robinson was struggling quite a bit, and Hero, his game's quite a bit different. I don't think he has the same level of mind meld with Adebayo that someone like Duncan Robinson has. Their screening game is amazing, but Hero is not afraid to take shots, and he's quite good at handling the ball and dribble crossovers and things like that to throw defenders off. And he's also just like a badass, like he doesn't care. He'll fucking throw that shot up. I mean, he was doing the same stuff in the game against Milwaukee, the game 5, right? Pulling up, swishing shots right in his face.
He played 40 minutes tonight. 1 assist shy of a triple-double, 11 rebounds, 12 points. The big difference between Duncan Robinson and Tyler Herro has an off-the-dribble game.
Yeah.
He gets to the hole. I think his finishing is good for a rookie. It's going to improve a lot more, but he provides that extra oomph on offense that a secondary ball handler can give you. And I think down the stretch, he was their secondary ball handler.
I mean, he played 40 minutes in that game.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
I mean, Goran Dragic had an amazing game. Don't get me wrong, but it did seem like they were deferring to Herro more than I thought they would.
Mm-hmm.
What I was going to say, though, about these shots is I think one of the big differences in the Milwaukee-Miami series, and this was something that I was really interested in coming into this series, was the best players for Miami just outperformed the best players for Milwaukee in the clutch. Every game in the series went into the clutch, meaning within 5 points with 5 minutes left. And in those minutes, Jimmy Butler was amazing, as you would expect. He was 52.5% from the field and 50% from three, 90% from the line, and scoring 4 points per game in the clutch, which is nuts, plus 3.4. And Bam Adebayo did not miss in the clutch.
Yeah.
100% from the field and plus 3.2. On the other side, Giannis was 50% from the field and minus 4.3. And look, that 50% from the field for Giannis is different than Jimmy Butler's 52.5%, right? Giannis's 50% is getting to the rim and a couple fast break dunks. Jimmy Butler is actually isolating. He's slowing the game. He's letting the clock roll down, right? And then just quickly, Middleton, terrible. 30% from the field, 33% from three, minus 2.4 in those minutes. So I think there was this theme in the Milwaukee-Miami series of just crunch time performance. And you saw that again in this series.
Yeah.
In game 1. Boston really had the game in the bag, and Miami chipped away in the fourth quarter, tied it up at the end of regulation, and then did what they do in overtime.
Yeah. I think one thing that Toronto did that was very effective that Miami has continued to do is just put a lot of pressure on Kemba Walker. And one thing that Miami was able to do, I think, more effectively than Toronto, although Toronto did do quite a good job at this as well, is targeting Kemba on defense and tiring him out more, frustrating him more, drawing more fouls from him, just making him look and feel terrible.
Yeah.
And it worked wonders. Now, the way that Miami did it was different than Toronto. They didn't have, a guy just trailing Kemba the entire time. They had a very, very aggressive zone going. And anytime Kemba Walker took a dribble inside the arc, they were just swarming him. He looked like he was drunk at certain points with the dribble, just like really out of control. Luckily, Jaylen Brown had a great game, was just always in the right place. Okay, not always. Not enough, honestly, but he was in the right place enough times to clean up broken plays and to be a willing shooter, get some nice, I think he had one really big putback for Boston that gave them a lot of hope. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough. Marcus Smart, also amazing game. Just shooting threes like he's Steph Curry in transition. Unbelievable. I mean, if he continues playing at this level, which, let's be honest, none of these guys are going to continue playing at this very level, but even close to that, I mean, it's very scary. Very, very scary.
Yeah, I would say you'll take the odd, amazing Marcus Smart game when it comes.
Yeah.
He's not going to score 26 points every night. And I think you got a pretty standard great game from Jason Tatum, especially rebounding. 14 boards for the game.
Yeah.
But 30 points on 10 for 24 from the field and 4 for 12 from 3. What more can you ask from him? Great defense, too. I think, like you said, Kemba Walker is going to be a very important player to watch in this series because as good of a defense as I thought that Miami played on him, and on the other side of the ball, they really targeted him and put him through hell,
Yeah.
There were a lot of plays designed to create a switch of Kemba Walker onto Jimmy Butler, and Jimmy Butler is going to beat him up.
That's the difference between having someone like Jimmy Butler in that position versus Pascal Siakam with all the confidence ripped out of him. Jimmy Butler is actually going to make him feel totally miserable. Siakam might get a few points from it, but what ended up being the end of Toronto in the second round was he just couldn't capitalize enough on those things and just had very little impact that was positive on any of those games on the offensive end.
Yeah, and also, I mean, just more generally, Jimmy Butler is going to back you down and shoot through you.
Yeah.
Pascal Siakam is going to shoot over you.
Yeah.
And around you. It's different. And when you get beat up in the paint, it throws your shot off, right? And tonight, I think you saw that with Kemba Walker. He just was not hitting shots that he normally makes. His 19 points, I think, is sort of a misleading stat. He went 6 for 19 from the field, 1 for 9 from 3. I mean, Jesus Christ, you can't do that if you're supposed to be one of the go-to scorers on this team.
Yeah, he was able to turn it around a little bit. Like, if he hadn't hit any of those, I should say, beautiful little elbow jumpers, getting some separation with the jab step and all that, if he didn't hit those, that game would have been just one of the worst games you could expect from a all-star like Kemba Walker.
Yeah, and some of those were very timely. There was especially the one at the end of OT.
Yeah,
that kept it a game.
Picked a good time to activate. Unfortunately, it just wasn't enough. And considering the pretty good performances of everyone else, it is a little bit concerning, although Miami did rely quite a bit on Jay Crowder just turning into Marcus Smart, who turned into Steph Curry.
Can we give a quick shout out to Enes Kanter for getting on the court for less than 1 minute?
I wonder why. Just for, end of game rebound, maybe? I don't know. Is he ever going to be played again? What matchup is he beneficial for?
maybe if they make it to the finals and play the Lakers, I could see him getting some time against McGee, Dwight Howard lineups.
They're not playing McGee and Dwight Howard in the finals, man. Those guys are done.
I'll tell you who he's not playing against is Nikola Jokic.
Yeah.
Although I can't imagine Robert Williams would do much better against Jokic.
No, I could see Tice doing a decent job.
Yeah, Tice, once again, great game from him, plus 12.
Yeah.
The guy just doesn't score at all, but they kill in minutes that he's on the court.
Yeah, I mean, he's always fouling out, but before he does that, he's really getting into the opposing team's center's face, and occasionally they do have a game where they're just feeding him the ball. You saw that against Toronto when Toronto went small, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So he's definitely their most useful center by far, although Robert Williams has had quite an impressive playoffs.
Yeah, and just really quick, Bam Adebayo, we're all going to remember the block, but his all-around game, aside from the block, was amazing. The reason we're talking about these centers and laughing about the fact that they're not playing is that they cannot play against Adebayo. He will eat them alive, right? He shot 11 free throws tonight because he was physically so much more dominant than the Boston centers. And then when he's away from the basket, he's tearing these centers apart too. He ended the game with 9 assists. That just shows a complete grasp of the game and control over the game.
Yeah, and his patience is so admirable. To have the trust that his teammates are going to do the right thing 3 seconds down the line, that's one thing that Spoelstra in this Miami team has been able to pull off very well. Have a team that has players that aren't just waiting around looking at each other. They're actually being proactive and moving, and it's amazing because a lot of the times you'd think, oh, how are they not getting it each other's way? But somehow their communication is just on point. There is kind of an intangible factor there that allows their offense to run really smoothly and to play zone as much as they have in this game, and also just, I think, over the course of the year. That just takes a lot of trust from your teammates. And of course, you're going to give up a few big shots, which they did this game. But as long as you get back there and adjust and cover guys like Marcus Smart a little bit more closely if he's getting hot from three, then you'll win them more often than not. So they look in a good position. Again, Celtics have a very good chance of coming back and taking this. Their individual talent is just off the charts. If they get Hayward back, Lord knows what's going to happen. I don't even really know if he would help them at this point, considering how well Marcus Smart is playing, but it is a factor to consider. And Wanamaker, for all the talk of how bad the Boston bench is, Wanamaker is a very, very dependable backup guard.
Yeah, I mean, I can't help but think that the 25 minutes that Wanamaker played tonight being siphoned into Gordon Hayward minutes would make a huge difference for this team.
Yeah.
But all right, that's enough about Heat Celtics. I think we can agree that it'll be a long series, but this was a very entertaining game one. Take a little break and then maybe get into some brief postmortems.
Yeah.
How does that sound? 20 minutes?
Yeah, we'll do 20 minutes. We'll just go quickly through.
Yeah, we'll just talk Lakers and maybe a little bit about Giannis and the Raptors. I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll figure it out. All right, we are back, and we'll start with maybe a little Toronto talk.
Yeah. I mean, we were just talking about the Celtics, so let's talk about the team that came within basically one possession of being in the Celtics position. Amazingly, I will say. I think credit to Toronto for somehow keeping it that close. If they had won game 7 by a point, their point differential, like on average per game, would have been like 6 points in the series. I don't even know what we would be talking about, considering Siakam played some of the worst basketball I think we've ever seen from him. And as good as Kyle Lowry is and was in game 6 in particular, the issue is, he's an aging star, and playing him 50 minutes a night, that's obviously going to lead to some fatigue. And although you saw the difference immediately once he fouled out in the Raptors' floor plan, essentially. Like, they fell apart pretty badly. Fred VanVleet had a really bad possession. I know people were talking about the Norm Powell breakaway attempted layup that got blocked by Marcus Smart as like a really terrible play. And I will say it was not the best play, but I understand where he was, If you have a straight line to the basket, go for that instead of like getting a half-court possession when your team's not that good in the half-court. Anyways.
Just really quick, I don't think that was a particularly poor decision from Norm Powell. I thought it was just an amazing play by Marcus Smart.
Yeah, I think that it was a little bit unfair on Norm Powell. It's not like he was Siakam and just dribbled into traffic 5 times in a row and turned over the ball every time. It was an unfortunate block, and he probably should have dunked it. I don't know why he didn't, but the Raptors are a transition team. They like to run. So, that's 2 points right in front of you. Why slow it down when you're down and you have like a minute and a half to go? Anyways, the point is, Toronto put in a good fight. The talent of the Celtics was extremely hard to overcome, and I think Toronto did really, really well in matching that just by being clever, especially when their highest scorer was struggling as badly as he is.
2 highest scorers, I'd say.
That's true.
Fred VanVleet struggled all series shooting the ball.
Yeah, but their defense was amazing. The Celtics, for as good as the Celtics looked on offense, surprisingly, the only game that they got above the 50th percentile in offensive rating, according to Cleaning the Glass, was the Game 5 blowout. Not even Game 1. So the Raptors, even at their worst, were still able to keep the Celtics to a fairly mediocre offensive rating. The problem was the Raptors' offense was just god-awful. But in Game 7, they actually kept the Celtics to only like 70 points per 100 possessions in the half court, which is really, really amazing. It was just on the transition buckets off of turnovers that they got slaughtered,
Yeah. I mean, it was... This series boiled down to the fact that the Celtics had a couple of good isolation players that they could get buckets from, especially Jason Tatum. He just seemed to be a difference maker all series long. And, I mean, he averaged almost 25 points per game for the series and was taking very difficult shots, shot almost 40% from 3. It was, in my opinion, one of Jason Tatum's coming out as a legitimate two-way NBA star.
Yeah.
Because his defense was unbelievable, too. So, I mean, going forward, I think Pascal Siakam really needs to take a look in the mirror and figure out how he can improve. And everyone's going to point to the three-point shooting because it was horrendous.
Yeah. Worst of all time in a playoff series with at least like 50 attempts, I think.
It was,
But the other 2 guys in the bottom 3 are Jason Kidd and Damian Lillard. So, good company to be in, I guess.
Yeah, so he's a mixture of Jason Kidd and Damian Lillard, but about 6 inches taller.
Yeah, he's perfect.
Anyways, I think you need to look at how he can figure out a play type that he can exploit down the stretch, right? Because the post-ups aren't cutting it.
No.
I thought the face-up game was a good candidate for improvement. Mm-hmm. Maybe get better at shooting over players in the mid-range.
Yeah.
Driving by players. I posted this to Twitter and got roasted.
Yeah, I don't understand why. Like, the Siakam face-up plays were not really that inefficient. Yeah, on the 3-ball, him just pulling up and shooting is not good. But in the mid-range, whenever he got, a smaller defender on him and was able to shoot over them, I thought he was relatively efficient.
Yeah, no, I agree.
What's funny about Pascal's performance, too, is you look at the box stats, and they're not that bad in some of the games. But the eye test is just, some of the misses that he had were just total makeable shots. Like, he had the exact position he needed. It's not like the Celtics were just out defending him at every single turn, although they did do a great job on him. And Marcus Smart and Jaylen Brown in particular really got into his head. But when you have an open step closer to the basket, and instead of taking that, you do a weird little baby hook that clanks, that's on you. That's just a mental issue that the only thing you can think of is, you just have to get back into the swing of things so that your instincts take over and you don't overthink it, because it does seem like his instincts just weren't there.
Yeah, and how do you fix that,
Sure, I think that, I don't think he'll continue playing as badly as he did. I don't think that's the kind of player he is. He was just bad throughout the bubble. It came to a head with the Celtics series, but I don't think it's at the point at which they need to start thinking of moving off his contract or anything like that. Like, one bad playoff series is not reason to lose hope in a player. If they did, though, I was thinking of a Pascal Siakam for CJ McCollum trade.
You're so excited about this.
Their contracts are identical. Same duration and same price. CJ is a little bit older, but I just think it would be interesting. And I also think Pascal, even after that terrible performance, I think give him like a few months into the next season and his stock will rise again, higher than CJ's, because he's a much better defender. I just feel like both of those guys make sense on the other teams based on their weaknesses, you know? CJ is a good shot creator for himself. He's not the guy, but he's pretty good. And Pascal is a much better defender than anyone really that the Trailblazers have right now at that position. And just a huge improvement at the wing spot, you know?
Yeah, I mean, look, the best iteration of the Portland Trailblazers, I think, has been the team we saw 2 years ago, right? That had Al-Farouq Aminu at the 4 and Yusuf Nurkic at the 5, right?
Yeah.
And what Pascal Siakam is a 2 times as good version of Al-Farouq Aminu, you know? It's all of the great defensive effort that you get from an Al-Farouq Aminu mixed with some shot creation and more speed and athleticism. So I think, yeah, that would be awesome to have a player like that around Lillard.
Yeah.
And on the other side of that deal, to have just more consistent three-point shooting for the Raptors would be huge.
Yeah. Yeah. And their stats are very, very similar, surprisingly.
And shot creation, just having another ball handler.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's something that the Raptors missed a lot in this Celtics series. So,
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I just thought how weird, like, they're within a point of each other in points per game. Their shooting splits are, like, extremely similar. Just a very interesting proposition. I still think that the Raptors probably would not do that unless there were, like, multiple picks attached or something, or, like, another player.
You can't trade Siakam.
No, I don't think they will. But it's a fun little, mind game.
Yeah, it's an interesting trade. Let's just move along.
Yeah, let's just talk about Houston for a bit, who also suffered an embarrassing end to their season, I think. And there was a big groan from the, I think, NBA world when people realized, oh my God, Houston is so fucked. They're like, this is painful.
Yeah, off the mic, we were talking about which team is worse off after these 2 terrible losses, either the Clippers or the Rockets, right? And I was thinking about that a little bit further just now, because it's funny that they both lost by big margins, but somehow the Rockets loss felt like embarrassing, and the Clippers loss felt sad.
Yeah.
Like it was 2 very different sentiments.
Yeah. The Rockets, they just looked like they stopped caring.
Yeah.
Fairly early on. I mean, earlier in the series, even.
Yeah.
I think people were just tired of hanging out with Russell Westbrook, who was just, like, getting hyped all the time, but, like, playing like total shit.
They got tired of his over-competitive cornhole.
Yeah, we'll put it that way. Yeah, I mean, just no one on that team really looked like they wanted to be there. Daniel House certainly didn't care whether he was there or not. He was actually very important for them. I think it's I think it's silly to be like, this guy Daniel House is one of the most important players on the Houston team, but...
Can I just really fast, I'd like to address the NBA players in the NBA bubble. I know you have to go get tested every day. Be careful who tests you, because you don't know where those hands have been.
That's right. They might have been on... Anyways, so Daniel House... He was actually quite important to them. I thought it was an interesting stat. So when he played less than 30 minutes in a game, Houston was 20-18. That includes games that he wasn't in. When he played more than 30 minutes, Houston was 24-10.
Jesus Christ.
It's like one of those stats, like Jamal Murray, every time he scores more than 20 points, the Denver Nuggets win like almost every game. When he scores less than 20, they just never win. But... I don't know if he would have changed the outcome of the series. I think the smart answer is absolutely not. It's still been a 5-game series. They might have just been a little closer. It's unfortunate because, if they had lost to OKC in the first round, that would be quite humiliating. But you could still hold out hope that, we got unlucky. Things didn't roll our way. We came up against a Thunder team that had a guy that was uniquely built to stop our main player. We didn't have Russell Westbrook for most of the series. There's different reasons that you could explain why they lost that didn't involve the basic philosophy around our team composition is flawed.
Yeah.
The Lakers' loss shows that is the case. You got out small balled by a team that has small ball as like a plan F. And they destroyed you, know?
Well, what's funny about it is, hold on while I get my very important calculations I made earlier. What's funny about it is, like, you found these numbers, the offensive rating for Houston over the 5-game series. It just progressively got worse and worse, right?
Yeah.
So I was curious about that, and my hypothesis was, as the series went along, the Lakers played Anthony Davis at center more and more, right? Because what's funny about the Lakers going up against Houston is Houston forced the Lakers to do what they really should have been doing all along. Houston, in a sense, unlocked the Lakers by forcing them to play Anthony Davis at center more. So the offensive rating for Houston goes down from 117 in the first game, progressively down to 94 by game 5, right? And if you look at JaVale McGee and Dwight Howard's minutes, in game 1, they each play about 12, right? 24 total minutes. Game 2, DNP for Howard, which will continue throughout the series until he plays in garbage time in the last game. And JaVale McGee's minutes just progressively descend until both of them are DNPing in game 4. And yeah, I mean, that's just the series. It's like your center, big quotes around that for Houston, is not going to be able to bang around with Anthony Davis.
Yeah. I mean, it was pretty much over, and they didn't need a guy like JaVale or Dwight Howard to protect the rim because it just wasn't a threat.
No.
When you have PJ Tucker and Covington as your biggest guys, you're just not that much of a threat for rolling to the rim. And the crazy stat was, like, Houston was shooting over 40% on threes throughout their losses. I mean, they were really shooting the ball well. One thing that LA did quite well was they put a lot of pressure around the arc, so Houston wasn't taking that many threes. They were limiting their attempts, but the ones that were getting off were going in quite often. But by forcing Houston to bang around in the paint, that's just a winning strategy. And, you know, also give credit to guys like Markieff Morris and Rondo for showing up, playing really efficient basketball. Rondo in particular just was a revelation somehow. Who knows? After that game 1 that was terrible, he came back and has played like the best stretch of games in, I don't even know how long, years.
Yeah, and, you know, aside from Rondo, I think just all of the Lakers' role players made a lot of threes. Markieff Morris's 50% from 3 for the series was very good for the Lakers, if not unexpected. Danny Green, 42.3%. Caldwell Pope, 42.1%. Those guys were getting better looks because they were playing Anthony Davis at center.
Yeah.
You know, when Anthony Davis gets deep position in the post and gets the ball, you have to double him. And if he's able to pass out of that, as with LeBron, by the way.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
One of the other things that having Anthony Davis at center opens up is LeBron at the 4.
Mm-hmm.
And if LeBron's at the 4, you know, it's the same thing. Like, a double's going to come. He's going to pass out of it because he's Terminator. And, yeah, you're going to get an open 3.
Yeah, and you don't just have a Houston defender hanging out by the rim because you have a non-shooter in the dunker spot waiting for the ball.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah, huge. Absolutely huge. I thought what was interesting was Harden, you look at his stat line, 29 points, 5 rebounds, 7 assists, 1.5 steals, 1 block on 50% from the field, 38% from 3, 84% from the free throw line. Looks like an all-time great playoff series performance, but you watch it and it's just like, damn, that's the worst looking amazing stat line I've ever seen from a player. I mean, he just looked absolutely dispirited, uninterested. And that energy is what your role players feed off. And, you know, if you just like pout around the court because they're like doubling you late into the shot clock and it throws your game off, and you don't actively try to seek, like we were talking about Jamal Murray, good off-ball opportunities to get yourself better shots, which open up opportunities for your teammates, your team's not going to win. If you have to be on ball to do anything with the ball, and your role players know that, and they know that once you pass the ball to them, they have to figure it out on their own, it's just not a winning strategy. And once LA gets the ball out of Harden's hands, it's just like easy as pie.
Yeah, I think Harden has the capabilities of being an amazing off-ball player. It's just more of an issue of forcing him to do it.
Yeah.
You know, and This might be a good time to segue into a brief conversation about Mike D'Antoni.
Yeah.
I think what was very obvious from watching this series is that the Rockets did not coalesce in a way that a championship caliber team should.
Yeah.
Especially emotionally. You mentioned it, like on the court. Often their star players looked dejected. The role players looked apathetic.
Yeah.
And it is the coach's responsibility to inspire their players and to get them to key in at an emotional level as well as a physical level.
Yeah.
So Mike D'Antoni said he's not coming back to Houston. I can't remember who he said was going to replace him. Was it Jim Boylan?
Yeah, dude, Jim Boylan and Morey's going to get fired.
They need a military ethic.
Yeah. Now they're going to fire Daryl Morey and bring in fucking Divac.
Divac.
So it's going to be great. Houston is going to tank for 20 years so they can get the protections on all of the picks that they traded to all the various teams that they did. Like, it's crazy when you look at how bad the moves they made are in hindsight. They really pushed all their chips in this season and
pushed a lot of their chips out. Like Mike D'Antoni, who
Right.
is not going to be coming back because the owner cheaped out and didn't want to extend him last off season, which is very normal for coaches, right? Going into the final season of your contract, you usually get an extension.
Yeah, and I think I read that the final straw for D'Antoni, like on the flight back after the series loss, he was still 50-50. And he was just waiting to talk about the situation with Tillman Fertitta, the owner of the Rockets. And Tillman never called. So he was just like, all right. He told his agent, he was like, just make the announcement before I land.
Well, that's what was really strange about the whole scenario is right after the game, reporters interviewed Mike D'Antoni and he said that he would love to come back to Houston.
Yeah.
That he loves it there. Then the next day, the story breaks.
Yeah.
And it was just, it struck me as very strange. Like there was a backstory and I guess that's it.
Yeah. Yeah, so we'll see what happens. Very real possibility that big changes are coming in Houston soon. We will see if they try to get a coach like perhaps Tyronn Lue, someone that has a history of working with superstars, big egos, try to rein them in, get them all to buy into one vision, maybe play with a bit less rigid of a scheme than D'Antoni. Who knows? Or if that isn't what Tillman Fertitta wants to do, they can blow it up. They can trade Harden. It'd be very weird to see Harden in a different jersey, but he's probably the only big asset that they have that has positive value right now. The Westbrook contract looks horrible. People thought the Chris Paul contract looked bad last year. That was nothing. This is bad. They have Eric Gordon signed until he's like 36 and going to be making over $20 million a year. And all of their other guys, like...
I think Gordon's still got value, by the way.
Yeah, I don't think he's terrible.
He could be a good player on a good team.
Yeah, he's just expensive, and all their other guys, the guys that like Daniel House, he's on a really value contract right now, and he could probably go elsewhere and get a big payday shortly.
I mean, assuming there's no future bubbles where we have to worry about his sexual conduct, then he could probably get a pretty good payday.
I'm pretty sure he has a wife too.
Yeah. Well, that's the sad understory to all of this. I think he had to leave the bubble to go fix his marriage. It's kind of depressing, but it's also like, don't be an asshole.
Yeah. Well, that's karma. And okay, so they have Daniel House until 2022, but I think it's safe to assume that Daniel House is not going to single-handedly turn the franchise around.
Is that super safe to assume?
Hey, I mean, crazier things have happened, but. Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see what kind of moves Daryl Morey or whoever. I think Daryl Morey will probably stay, but he's known to make big, risky moves. So we'll see what happens, All
right, here's the big risk. I'm going to fire myself.
They're going to trade Russell Westbrook to OKC for Chris Paul, and they're going to attach like 20 pick swaps to it.
Is there anything else just briefly, Giannis. I really don't actually want to talk about him that much. I would just say, Milwaukee's now saying they're going to spend to try to keep Giannis happy. I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah.
They do, however, have a couple of trade assets this season. They have Indiana's pick. They have all of their picks going forward. Aside from this year, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I believe they lost this year's pick in the George Hill trade.
Let's find out.
Sorry, Eric Bledsoe trade.
Yeah, they have Indiana's pick, but they traded. Somehow Boston has their pick.
Yeah, I think Boston traded with Phoenix last season and got their pick in the Aaron Baines trade.
It's so crazy that Boston is so good and has 3 first-round picks this year. How the fuck is Danny Ainge so good at his job?
They have 3 first-round picks every year and never really developed these guys in the mid to late first round.
Yeah.
I think the last good mid to late first rounder that they've developed was maybe Rondo.
Good assets anyways for a trade.
Yeah, we'll see. Maybe they can trade and get someone good.
Bledsoe better be gone. I mean, tough.
He has to be gone in order to create a good deal.
Yeah.
Because he just has to be the salary that you attach. Unfortunately, I looked over this recently. Unfortunately, Brook Lopez might also have to be a salary that you attach. And he had an amazing series.
He was one of the best.
Miami series.
Yeah, he might have been their best player in that series. I mean, aside from obviously Giannis put in his all. But Brook Lopez was just consistent night in, night out. Hitting big shots, playing really aggressively, fighting for it as if his life depended on it. And you just didn't see that with all the guys on the team. The other team, they're fine with a good Brook Lopez game or 5. It's about slowing down everyone else. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I definitely don't think that Giannis's desire is to be traded anytime soon, at least not before he becomes a free agent.
We're just waiting until the contract extension.
Yeah.
That's all we're waiting for. And I think he's going to take his time signing that and tell Milwaukee to prove to him that they can create a winning roster around him. And it'll be interesting to see if they do that. I want to hold my thoughts until a little bit closer to that date, I think.
Yeah.
But, yeah. This has been fun. I think we're going to try to do more playoff reactionary podcasts. We're getting better at cranking this shit out faster.
That's right. We're just cranking.
Follow us on Twitter. I'm getting good. I don't toot my own horn that often, but I'm feeling more and more confident with my Twitter game every day.
Just be careful, man. That's what the Charlotte announcer thought, and we saw how that turned out.
Anything else we need to mention before we close this shit down?
Nuggets Heat. Let's put our energy towards that. That'd be a great finals, and hope the Nuggets win it all. It's about time.
Yeah, Nuggets Heat. It'll be like that claymation Christmas movie where Mr. Heat fights Mr. Cold.
Exactly, dude. I know exactly what you're talking about. I have no idea what you're talking about.
We're leaving this in. All right, I'll wait to you, man.
All right, see you guys.